PERC recently produced the report Divided Lands, in which you compare the revenue streams of state trust lands versus the revenue streams of federal lands. State trust lands are managed with the sole objective of maximizing revenue. Whether it's mining in New Mexico or timber in the Pacific Northwest, there is one clear objective: generate as much revenue as possible. Federal lands, while they do produce significant revenue, have a much broader management mandate that includes outdoor recreation, energy and mineral production, and the conservation of natural, historic, and cultural resources on behalf of all Americans. Even the so-called multiple-use lands managed by BLM and the Forest Service have a multifaceted mandate that goes far beyond revenue generation. So my question is, do you think it's fair to compare the revenue streams of state trust lands who have a sole objective to those of federal lands?
I do. I think one of the findings from that report is that the federal government can learn a lot from the states. And it's not necessarily just on the dimensions of generating revenues, but states allow a lot more competitive bidding. There are a number of other ways that they're managing lands in a fiscally responsible way that's not a drain on taxpayers. And what we found, one of the surprising findings in that report, is that the lands are not managed in a way that prohibits all access or hunting access, and there's innovative mechanisms that are being explored by state trust agencies to allow, for instance, conservation leasing, so allowing conservation groups to acquire leases for conservation purposes. That's something the federal government generally does not allow. So I think that there is a lot that the states can teach the federal government about responsible federal land management, and so I do think it is a useful comparison.
Mr. Newberg, do you feel that it's fair to compare revenue from state trust lands to that of federal land?
I would not, and that's my background as a CPA. We report to users, here's what the financial numbers say, and you have to look at all context of that. And as you stated, the state trust lands have one responsibility: revenue generation. On the federal side, they have fire suppression, they have reimbursement and revenue share with counties and local governments, they have to provide access, they have to be concerned of threatened and endangered species, roads, water quality, everything else. And I guess the best analogy that I could use is that to take a look at that report and use it to criticize the federal government performance and all of their requirements, all of their mandates compared to the single mandate of the states' trust lands would be kind of like probably criticizing the American Red Cross that you did not give an appropriate return on the assets like a hedge fund on Wall Street did. They're completely different, completely. I mean, it's not apples and apples. It's not even apples and oranges. It's probably apples and bicycles is what that comparison is.
Thank you. I also find it strange, Mr. Reagan, that your report does not account at all for the economic contribution of outdoor recreation beyond user fees, which are certainly just the most minimal aspect of that contribution. I think we have several CEOs, maybe not in this room today, but were they here, they would be quick to point out that outdoor recreation, conservation, and historic preservation activities support 9.4 million jobs and contribute more than $1 trillion annually to the U.S. economy. They'd also be quick to point out that our public lands represent a huge economic asset that underpins their entire industry. And then there's the economic impact of sportswomen and men, who are spending more than $90 million annually, a number greater than the annual sales of iPhone and iPads worldwide, and supporting almost 1 million jobs. In western states, 7 out of 10 hunters and anglers depend on public land for access to fields and streams. So, Mr. Newberg, would you care to comment on this omission?
It's a reporting issue of comparative, and comparative assumes that you're looking at the same features of the two items you're comparing. And these benefits that are provided by the federal lands you cannot argue what those benefits are, whether it's the access component you mentioned, whether it's the financial benefit of all of the businesses that have been built on those types of access, and to just compare that to one agency whose primary purpose is revenue generation it's not a true comparison.
Thank you. My time is up.
Thank you. Chairman Bishop. Oh,